Julian Sabulescu, a philosopher and bioethics from the UHERO chair in particle ethics at the University of Oxford, known for his work on ethical issues in medicine and biotechnology, and Anders Zandberg, a Swedish researcher and futurist known for his work in the field of transhumanism and the study of human enhancement and the future of humanity. In their article, Neuroenhancement of Love and Marriage, the chemicals between us, state that, quote, evolution has not created us to be happy, but rather created happiness to keep us alive and reproducing, end of quote. Writing about the possibilities of making interpersonal marriages more lasting, they note that in the United States, divorce has replaced death as the most common reason for marriage breakdown. They show the cruelty of nature. On the one hand, it requires us, if we want to survive as a species, to create different sex relationships, which in human societies is indicated by the research they used are the most often monogamous, and therefore requires a certain stability. On the other hand, the same nature does not give us specific biological tools to maintain the stability of this relationship. And if it does give any, it is not to ensure a happy relationship for men, but to enable procreation and to effect natural selection. The cruelty of nature, they suggest, is also expressed in the fact that the breakdown of marriage has a negative impact on the physical health of individuals, has a negative impact on well-being, and also brings a high risk of failure in raising children. In the cited text, the philosophers discuss the potential possibilities of enhancement, human love and marriage. In conclusions, provoking a revolt against evolution and its laws. They state, quote, there is no human moral imperative to obey evolution, end of quote. Max Moore, a British philosopher, futurist, and one of the leading voices in the transhumanist community, writes in his letter to the Mother Nature that he is grateful to her for many things, but he sees that she has lost interest in human development around 100,000 years ago. For this reason, Moore declares that as an ambitious descendant of Mother Nature, we must take matters into his own hands. He gives 7 amendments that he intends to implement to enhancement human nature. In the fifth amendment, it states, quote, we will fix all individual and species defects left over from the evolution by natural selection, end of quote. In this way, he states that the purpose of Mother Nature is not to make human life pleasant and full of well-being. Mother Nature does not spare her descendants and dispassionately pursues her reproductive goals. Eduardo Cruz sums up this thinking accurately in his article, quote, the evolution of human birth and transhumanist proposals of enhancement. The title of article is The Evolution of Human Birth and Transhumanist Proposal of Enhancement, and the quote is, natural selection is not about happiness, but fitness for reproduction, end of quote. Thanks to these 2 references above, it is not difficult to understand that contemporary philosophers working in the field of reflection on human enhancement view evolution quite critically. They see quite a lot of gaps in it, which we as humans should improve, looking at their assessment of evolution. We can conclude that evolution with its natural selection is a set of traits aimed at maximizing reproduction. The philosophical reflection of transhumanists on evolution leads to many serious questions. Why does evolution allow us to be born dependent on others? Why does it agree to such a risk from the perspective of changes for survival process? Why does it tolerate the existence of involuntary pain and suffering? In the transhumanist literature, unnecessary and involuntary suffering is generally viewed as senseless, yet another of the boundaries inherited fault the evolutionary process. Transhumanists do not spare words in describing the hazard nature of evolution as a source of imaginable suffering. By asking these and similar questions, philosophers looking into the future of humanity are looking for answers. The transhumanist response is bold and at times even radical. If natural evolution cannot deal with certain problems, such as evolutionary suffering, then maybe we, humans, should take matters into our own hands and deal with the imperfections of our nature ourselves. Many futurologists accept this possibility and look for ways to achieve it. Ray Kurzweil, a director of engineering at Google and futurist, sees the way to overcome evolutionary limitation in technological development. It assumes that the complexity and perfection of machines will, at some point in history, surpass the complexity of the human organism and allow it to overcome its current limitations. He states that, quote, "We must overcome our genetic inheritance because our bodies are governed by antiquated genetic programs developed in bygone era." End of quote. In the transhumanist reflection on evolution presented in this way, two fundamental questions arise. Should we strive to improve man, and whether or to what extent we should respect to the laws of evolution in the process of human enhancement? When, in accordance with the transhumanist proposal, we answer positively to the first of the questions, on the fundamental question remains: can human enhancement help overcome evolutionary limitations? This is a serious question. Many transhumanists ask themselves. Among them is Nick Bostrom, a Swedish philosopher, head of the Future Humanity Institute at the University of Oxford. On the one hand, he recognizes the wisdom of nature that is supposed to be behind evolution. On the other hand, he argues that even if evolution has its wisdom, we should improve it because our desires are different from this of evolution. Man strives for happiness, and evolution seeks to create the best reproductive model. Thus, there is a dramatic mismatch between what we as humans value and what evolution promotes. Russell Powell and Alan Buchanan, the American ethical philosophers of human enhancement, criticize evolution as more of a handyman than a true engineer. They predict that intentional genetic modification of man can bring him a lot of good. Therefore, they propose the enhancement-assisted evolution. This process would lead not only to the improvement but even to the reconstruction of the human organism. It is claimed that improving a man limited by the biological conditions of his body does not lead to the achievement of perfection assumed by transhumanists in the long run. Those promoting enhancement-associated evolution seems to take the position that only genes are responsible for the final shape of an organism, which, according to Richard Dawkins, uses the human body to spread itself. According to this famous evolutionist, the body is for the genes, not the genes for the body. Many transhumanists accept this statement and legitimate and optimistic about enhancement-assisted evolution. This allows them to believe that the human species will be in a position to assume substantial and deliberate control over its own evolutionary biological destiny, taking decisions that could affect the fate of human nature, the human species, and the future life on Earth. However, there is another side of the coin. Pain and suffering, which, in accordance with the transhumanist program, want to be eliminated from human life, have not only a negative role and are not only an evolutionary necessity. They bring various benefits. Pain has an adaptive role. We can see it from the very moment of human birth, which is naturally associated with pain. The fact that a woman bears in pain means that from the very moment of birth, a certain human community is created around the newborn, which helps not only the mother but above all the child to survive. This community, cemented by pain, helps the young offspring to adapt to a hostile environment. Human children are born not fully developed and dependent on their parents, which can be blamed on evolution. However, it can be attributed to a set of evolutionary achievements that the dependence of human offspring on adults is overcome by the natural desire to actively counteract suffering, much less innocent suffering. Empathy, which makes you sensitive to the suffering of others, scientists find has a strong evolutionary basis. Thanks to the screaming pain, a human baby is not isolated from its caregiver when it is born, and its chance of survival increased dramatically. Perhaps evolution needs pain because thanks to it, man acquires such skills to achievements, such a development that it's not predicted at the genetic level. The birth of a child is a very dramatic event. From a transhumanistic point of view, they are painful and require enhancement. However, if we take a moderate direction and recognize the evolution which its natural selection takes into account, not only purely genetic factors but also environmental factors, and uses them not only for survival but also for development, then it is easy to understand that pain that accompanies birth is not entirely senseless. Its task is to arouse care for a specific individual, to create a certain social environment around the mother and her offspring, which has two basic tasks. Firstly, is to reduce the risk of failure during childbirth, and secondly, is to enable the newborn to adapt to difficult and constantly changing environmental conditions. Due to the fact that a person is born not fully developed, he has to chance to complete his development as required by the conditions in which he is to live. We can understand this from the immune system, which at birth is not ready for its unlimited, for its ultimate role. However, when exposed to external factors, it learns very quickly and acquires great skills that, to a large extent, allow a specific individual to survive in a given environment for a lifetime. We refer to this ability as required immunity. This is an interesting evolutionary strategy. It allows for quick and effective adaptation to changing external circumstances. Although even this evolutionary achievement must be subject to trade-offs. On the one hand, they make us evolve slowly, but on the other hand, they make our direction of development more effective and safe. The role of pain in this evolutionary anthropological story is to provoke an effective response to the threat from the perspective of the survival of a specific individual and thus the entire species. There is a well-known saying about this: no pain, no gain. Pain is a greater motivator for development. Let's look at how many technologies and techniques have been created just to avoid pain. One could be tempted to say that if it wasn't for the pain, transhumanist consideration about the revolutionary technological overcoming of evolution would be impossible. I'm not saying that pain is ethically desirable and morally good, but what I'm saying is that from the perspective of evolutionary anthropology, it can be assisted as an effective tool for the survival of the species and as a kind of complement as transhumanists claim of blind and imperfect natural selection. Skeptical of transhumanist plans to genetically remodel humans, ethics such as Immaculada de Melo Martini, professor of medical ethics in medicine in Whale Corner Medicine, Martin Baudry and Massimo Pilucci, note that not only genes but also environmental conditions play a role in human evolution. The culture that man creates is an element that compensates for genetics shortcomings and ultimately naturally influences evolution. In conclusion, let's ask ourselves, where did all this relentless effort to improve man come from? Paradoxically, the cause may be unwanted pain. It accompanies a person from the moment of birth through life until death. And while physical pain can be effectively eliminated by modern medicine, the pain we call suffering still remains. We react with all commitment to the moving cry of a newborn child, where we suffer when we are affected by illness. We suffer because of the passing of a loved one. When we suffer, we feel bad. Transhumanists want to hard to name and unwanted lack of well-being to be transformed and eliminated from human life. But isn't the very pain we call suffering that it's the cause of our growth? But isn't the very pain we call suffering that it's cause of our growth? In view to above, the questions arise whether the elimination of pain and the transition to a higher than evolutionary stage of human development will not lead to the extinction of our species. If we make it clear to evolution that we no longer need it, will we not deprive ourselves of the life-giving source of incomprehensible and those valuable factors for our development? If a post-human abandons its biological shell and becomes a cyborg feeling only happiness and well-being, will it have enough energy and motivation to look for new solutions and ways to survive in changing environment? Will not entering this level of development be the becoming of the end of the human species? Or is it also true, as some transhumanists claim, for example, Ray Kurzweil, that it is evolution that leads man to the post-human direction? If so, does that mean that entering this level probably won't eliminate pain and suffering, just new variations of it? What? One of them may be the worry where to draw infinity amounts of energy for the functioning of a cyborg man and how to provide him with a sufficiently durable, long-lived material basis for existence. How to relate all this mosaic of thoughts and theories to God? In the letter to Hebrews, we can read the following thought: From whom the Lord loves, he disciplines. He scourges every son he acknowledges. At the time, all discipline seems a cause not for joy but for pain. Yet later it brings the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who are trained by it. Righteousness in Hebrews means being obedient and subject to God's will. The fruit of righteousness is salvation. But does salvation have to be through suffering? Suffering destroys human ideas about the harmony of the world and introduces dissonance into the evolutionary order of the cosmos, which requires exemplation both from the philosopher and the theologian. I think we all feel this dissonance that requires explanation. It can be answered in many ways, but probably no one answer will satisfy everyone. And the last one, chapter, trying to find a theodicy sense in the existence of suffering. I will use the option of a well-known philosopher in Poland, Father Józef Tischner, who not only wrote about evil and suffering, but also experienced it in the last years of his life, having cancer of the larynx. One day, quote, "One day, seriously ill, Father Józef Tischner was visited by Jarosław Gowin. Some time before they they had talked a lot about suffering. During the next visit, Tishner, who could not longer speak, handed Govin a pieces of paper with the words, "Death not ignoble." End of quote. In one of these last articles, Tishner wrote, quote, "Suffering always destroys. What lifts, rises, and elevates is love." End of quote. A moment earlier he states, "God is love." Let this testimony about God saving from the destructive effects of suffering be a summary of the reflection on the transhumanist position towards evolutionary indifference to pain and suffering undertaken in this speech. Thank you very much.